Okay, there's 10 people here already. I guess we can start, and if anybody connects later, they'll be able to, if they missed something, to grab the recording afterwards. So let me just start off with a couple of introduction slides. As always, welcome everyone. Before I hand over to this week's presenter, I just want to kind of make you aware of our channels. If you haven't subscribed to any of those, this is where you can watch the recordings from our last sessions and also this session. And feel free to just subscribe to these and check out what we have done so far in the past. It's Augustine and me, and what we're trying to do is just giving you the opportunity to either speak or listen to some of the great speakers that we're inviting on a weekly basis, since we strongly believe that sharing is caring, and that we as a community grow when we're presenting or being able to look at some of the great stuff that's out there, and the great people presenting their stuff. So feel free to add us on LinkedIn. You can see also Augustine's Twitter handle there. Just reach out and yeah, let him know if there's anything that you would like to know, or you have any questions. Really great news. We're up to 1,000 members on Meetup. I think it's not 1,000, but 994. The last time I checked, might be 1,000 already, but yeah, feel free to also join our bigger Meetup community, and thanks to everyone who has already done that. It's great to see that so many people are interested, and that you're all trying to join us every week. As for the upcoming sessions, the next Data Jazz on Tuesdays, slightly different format, where Nicola and Augustine are more in a conversational mode, and where they're talking about yeah, some interesting topics, always with a guest, is on June 14th. So it's a monthly one. You should definitely check it out and see if that might be interesting to you, if you like the sessions that we have here. Another upcoming sessions that we're having are, as you can see on the first, we have Dustin Ryan with the Power BI Governance 101. Then a week later, Andy Cutler integrating Power BI with Azure Synapse Analytics serverless SQL pools. It's a tongue twister there. Then a week later, Eric Svensson, where I think that the topic's not yet set, but we'll update it and announce it as soon as we get more info on that. And then we have Power BI Composite, Hybrid and Advanced Models with Alex. So yeah, just mark that in your calendar if you're interested in that. And with that, I'm concluding the small intro session, and handing it over to Ben, who's gonna do his session today on introducing bespoke visualizations. So welcome, Ben.
Hello there. Thank you very much for having me. It's always fun to talk about Deneb. And yeah, I saw one question at the very start, random question: am I using the same camera? Yes, I'm using the same camera as I do for my live chats. I'll start sharing my screen, and I've got one or two slides that I will use before we actually start looking at Power BI, Deneb. Basically, I've written here the basics to the slightly less basics. This is simply because this is nothing where we get in massively in depth, because you can do a lot with Deneb using Vega, Vega-lite. It's simply how to get started and the visualizations that you can build, and how you can build from your own work and using documentation. So hopefully there'll be something there for you. And yeah, that's pretty much what I'm presenting. Very quickly about me, because you're not here to learn about me, you're here to learn about Deneb. I am a Senior Data Analyst, and of course, I am a Power BI enthusiast. I've been working with Power BI since beginning of 2017. And if you're interested, I do have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Power BI guy. I do videos a lot about Deneb, and also I do like weekly chats with people from inside the Power BI community, very informal, always good fun. So feel free to check those out as well. Deneb is what we're here for. What Deneb is, we'll see as we go, of course, but it is basically a visualization which allows you to use Vega or Vega-lite to create a bespoke visualizations. So visualizations where maybe we could say you're only limited by your imagination and your technical skills with Vega-lite. There are of course some restrictions, but there are lots of things you can do using this tool or this visualization that you most definitely couldn't do with your standard visualizations in Power BI. It's all open source, which means it's free. There's no license fees, nothing like that. Everything that you build, you can share with however number of people you want within an organization, externally when you use reports such as publish to web, if you build those sorts of reports. Of course, you invest your own time, so that is essentially money, if you will, depending on how much you value your own time. But it's worth the effort. That's really what I want to get across today. It's worth the effort, and with a little bit of effort, I think you can go quite a long way. I always say at this point, because I think it's important to note that I have no real coding background. I dabbled in HTML back in the 90s, but then I didn't do anything for quite some time. So it's for me pretty decent to pick up. Doesn't require a huge amount of well, does a huge amount of effort. It does, but you'll get there. So this is, of course, Power BI. Before we go into that, I'm going to switch screens and we'll have a look at the documentation, which is usually the boring part, but I think documentation is pretty cool. In Deneb, basically, if we just go to pick a website, I'm on the wrong one. So if we go, for example, to Vega-lite, this is a website and it tells you what it's about. So this is a lot of reading, but essentially you can just go to examples and scroll down. You can see some examples of the visualizations that you're able to create using Vega-lite or Vega. We're going to stick to Vega-lite here because it's a bit more simple, and that's certainly the level that I'm at. I haven't felt restricted enough yet to make that switch to learn Vega one day, but not right now. So as I said, you can scroll down and, pie chart's wonderful. If you so wish, you can build a pie chart, but as we'll see in a second, you can use these examples and they'll take you quite a long way on your journey to help you understand what each element is. So if, for example, we go and now I understand if you want to build a bar chart, you could just do that with Power BI. I mean, a standard visualization. So why would you want a bar chart with Deneb, with Vega-lite? Well, I'll click on it and I'll kind of show you why it's helpful to use a bar chart. So you click on the example and it's going to basically show you the code which exists inside Vega-lite to create this bar chart. So if I skip back now and back in Power BI, we can do a quick comparison of that to something else. So here I've already created a Deneb visualization. It's very easy to get. It's a standard visualization. You can just click on your ellipses as you do to get more visuals, and you get it that way. So I already have it here. So when I want to create it, as you do with all visualizations, you'll click on it and it will just appear. Yeah. So in this case, I've already pulled in everything that I want to use. I've got total points by game week, round, and team abbreviation. For those who are interested, I'm using sports data. This is data from the English Premier League fantasy football. It's not so important, but in case you're wondering what I'm referencing, that's what it is. So I have here what I want. And now to actually start creating my visualization, you can just go and you click on the three dots, more options, and you go to edit. And then this thing appears. So what this is basically saying is from from what you have, what you want to build. So I can choose if I want to go simple bar chart, grouped. So it gives you these options, which is great. It's a nice start. Then you can select, your category, and you select your measure based on what you have here. So I can here, and it gives me the drop down to see what I want to create. In this case, because I want to go from scratch, and for the purpose of what we're doing here today, this intro, I will just go to empty, and I'll click on create. When you do that, this is kind of what you're shown. You've got your data set, and mark is null. So if you skip back now to the documentation, we can see here we have a bar. So mark is bar, and then we have all this encoding X and Y, and the data values are this is just hard coded, right? This is just manually typed. So we can take some of this and then apply it to our visualization, our Vega-lite here. These other things I'll get to in just 1 second. I'll try my best to give you a nice overview of what everything is and what you do with it. But for now, I want to get that code I'm going to bring in here. So if I just copy and paste basically everything from, mark is bar, everything from here down over, I'll just copy that and just paste it here. You'll see that basically we have what we have. We have encoding X and Y. I'll just click, well, at this point, I'll tell you what the buttons are. It's a good time to do that. So this will apply any changes that you've made. So if I click Control and Enter, or click this button here, it will apply those changes. There's also the option to use this one, which is auto apply as you type, which is what I used when I first started. I quite liked it, but I kind of moved more on the side of this now. Repair and format is pretty much what I'll use now, which it corrects the formatting of it, of the code, and it makes it look a little bit tidier. So if I now click this one here, for example, you'll see it's sorted out my code. It looks a little bit nicer to read, and it's also applied the changes. Yeah, so you can see now I have something. It's a whole lot of nothing, because if you look here, you can see that I have my mark bar, and my x-axis field is A, and my y-axis field was B. Well, we don't have those fields, so that's why I'm showing nothing, right? So if I just go back out and have a look, and I have these values, so total points by game week, I have my round and this sort of thing. So I will here, for my x-axis, I want field to be round. And as I type, you have this, IntelliSense, which works very well. It's great. So I can just select what I want, and I want round. And in my y-axis, what I want to have is I want to have my total points per game week. By game week, sorry. Someone's asked me to zoom in, and I should be zooming in already. So hopefully you can see me zooming in. Yeah. Are you seeing me zoom in or no?
No.
No? I'm using Zoom in and it's not working. So 1 second, maybe I'll just use this instead. I'll use this zoom in. It's a bit harder to use, but is that better? Yeah, okay. So now I have here, I've got my round in my field. I have my Y total points by game week. And when I apply those changes, hopefully you then should see the changes that I apply. So yeah, so there you go. I've made those changes, and I now have my round across my x-axis and my y-axis. So my value is total points per game week. You might then wonder why I have all these like white lines up and down the middle. And the reason for that is if you pull in data that you're not using within Deneb, it will still break the data down. So here I've got my team abbreviation. This value here, team abbreviation, it's basically applying this, and it's kind of adding it to my, using it kind of like a, whatever, like a dimension, if you will. So I've got here round, and I've also got my team abbreviation. So if I take out team abbreviation, you'll see the lines are gone, right? So it's important to only bring in data that you're going to use unless you want that level of aggregation. So In this case, when I want to show data this way, I don't need it, but I do, as I progress, want to have that value back inside my my visualization. So I'll just put that back in, and you can see now it's back. Now the lines are back there again. So it's important to remember to only bring in the data that you actually need, which is a pretty standard best practice anyway, but just in case you're wondering why that happens. So this is what we have. We have this visualization, and as I say, it's a very, very standard bar chart. Yeah. Obviously, we're not here to build a standard bar chart, but what I want to do is really emphasize this point of when you start to understand the basics of Vega-lite, it's easy. It becomes a lot easier to build on your own work with quite a lot of, actually, if you want to, I do, because I'm very, very bad at typing, copying and pasting, this sort of thing, taking data from documentation, this sort of thing. So if we look here again at our mark bar, what we can see from that is that if we type mark bar, we get a bar chart. So we can ask ourselves, okay, what other types of marks exist? So if we go back here to our documentation and we just look at here mark, it really just lists a whole lot of stuff here, right? So you've got mark, you've got area, bar, line, all this sort of stuff. So if you just replace that word, you can switch between different visualization types quite easily. It's quite cool. So now here, for example, if I would go to mark and then just add line, it becomes a line chart. Again, because I have this in, it's not helping. Now I have a line chart. Obviously, this is not a great visualization. I understand that. This is just really how to build the first couple of things, and we're going to build upon that and create something which hopefully you find interesting and helpful. Yeah. So really, just by changing the mark and this value here, you can quite quickly change between lots of different visualizations. Put my abbreviation back in because I do need that. So this is what I've done here. We've basically said I want my x-axis to be my round, and I want my y-axis to be total points per game week. What I want to do is start to create what is essentially, if I do correctly, hopefully, like a matrix using Deneb. And there are some nice benefits to this. So instead of saying I want my y-axis to be my total points per game week, I can just switch this and say I want my y-axis to instead be something like team abbreviation. Get rid of the type quantitative. And then we have something like that, which looks weird because it's not really a visualization. It's just a whole lot of squares, right? But it's this is the building blocks. This is the step-by-step what we do to create something that is something that you really can't otherwise do in Power BI with a standard visualization. So this is my mark bar, and I'm going to change this quickly from mark bar to mark rectangle rather than bar, and that's more what we want if we start look at a matrix. So it will kind of start off looking more like a heat map. This is what we're going to build here. So I've got my mark, correct, and I've got this here. And what I now want to do is add other elements, because at this point we only have one mark. Actually, before that we won't. I'll do something else first. Sorry, just change my mind there. This is my encoding, as I mentioned before, where I've got my x-axis and I have my y-axis. What I'd like to do now is add something for the color. So I can say this, my x-axis is based on this information here. As we said, we had round, we have the type of that. This I'll come back to a little bit later. And y-axis we just looked at. So we can basically just state the encoding for many different elements. And I want to add now my encoding for the color. So what I'm going to do is I can just go here and I can add that information. So here, as you see, This is my x-axis from here to here. This is my y-axis from here to here. So then just below, I'm just going to add color. Make sure I spell it like an American person. And then I will state that I want the color to be based on a field, right? So instead of saying color black or white, I want the color to be dependent on a field. So I'm going to here, I'm going to go color, and I'm going to go field. And the field is going to be total points by game week. Right here, color, and that one. Color. Points per game week, and I want the aggregate to be like a sum of that. Just give me 1 second. Fall back on a bit of copy and paste, and I apologize. There it is. This is always the way. I missed out a little colon here, which I was having this error at the bottom. Maybe that was intentional. It wasn't, but I'll pretend it was. If you have an error, you'll get this cross at the bottom, and it tells you that the line where the error is, and you can just go to it and see what you've done wrong. And I forgot to do that. So now hopefully it will work. Yeah, it did. So what I now have is I have all of these rectangles, which are stated here, and all these rectangles are colored by this value total points per game week. Yeah, which is great because now it's kind of looking a bit like a heat map, if you will. You can also specify types of colors to use. 1 second, my son's literally just walked in.
Why was the door open?
Excuse me 1 second. Sorry about that, I'm back. My son just got back from the keto. Anyway, so what I was having here is I have my total points per game week, and that's the colors of the rectangles, and it's aggregated by sum. So as I said before, it's a heat map, and you can see from the legend the highest values, and here the lowest values. Standard stuff. You can also specify the different color schemes, and there's a lot of documentation for this. So color schemes here is part of the, as I say, the documentation. Also here within the Deneb, this is fantastic work done by Daniel, by the way. He's documented different ways you can use color schemes with this. It's something that it's very much worth reading if you're working with different color schemes within Deneb. And I'm going to use that now because I think one of them is quite a nice way to show this sort of data. So I said here, aggregate is sum. And also what I can do is I can specify like scales, and I said scales and schemes. So that's what I'm going to do in the next part. I'm just going to take this in. So I have aggregate is sum. I'll zoom in again as it's been requested. So aggregate sum. Now I have my scale and my color scheme and this Power BI ordinal. So if I apply this change now, you can see that this color scheme has changed here as well. If I just scroll across there. Yeah. What we're going to do is also add values to this. So because I'm adding values, I don't want to have a legend on this visualization. So for that, I can simply add here, and I can just go legend, and then I'm going to type. I always get confused between false and null. I'm going to use null. Legend is null. Zoom back out. There you go. So my legend has disappeared, which might seem a bit weird at the moment because I've got no values. I've got a kind of heat map-ish. But once we add values on top of that, it's going to start to look better. I hope you agree. And I'm just going back here through this documentation from Daniel. Is this different Power BI color divergent, which actually looks quite cool. Let's try this one. So we have color ordinal. If I try Power BI color divergent, apply that, you get this sort of colors, which I think are look a bit nicer when you really want to emphasize those top values, you know. But again, you go through them. There's many you can use. But that's what I'll stick with for now. So actually what I'm going to do as well, this is going to annoy me. I'm just going to go at the top and I'm just going to say is not null. I have to excuse the nulls on my dodgy data set here. So there you go. Now when I want to add my data labels, what I want to start looking at is this here, because this is my mark. So we have one mark, and this is the rectangle. So when you think about creating visualizations that have bars and lines, bar, line chart, or any other number of things, you will pretty much always have to use more than one mark. And to do that, you have to layer your marks. You have to create layers. And it's pretty, once you kind of understand the concept of it, it's pretty straightforward thing. You basically specify layer using the word layer, and then you just start to create multiple marks. Yeah, so this is the next step for us in creating this visualization, which will end up hopefully in a matrix that you like. So what I'm going to do, again, I said here, I need to create layers. So really to do that, what I'm going to do is go above my mark and I'm going to say layer. And then, so I'm going to layer, opening it up, specifying that I'm starting a layer like that. And then I'll specify when that layer ends. So really at this point, I've done nothing other than say, I'm going to create layers, but I haven't actually created any layers other than the one that already exists, right? So when I apply this change, nothing changes. Yeah, because again, I've added nothing. I've just kind of started the process of layering. I'm going to clean this up a little bit. I don't like that. Looked like that before. Doesn't matter. So, got a nice big gap there to make it a little bit clearer. And also here, so we can kind of see what we're doing. So this is my first layer. And what I want to do now is create other layers. Actually, before I do that, I'll do one more thing, and that is here. If I type mark rectangle, I've got my mark, which is, of course, a rectangle. If I want to add like other elements to that, it's easy, it's better really. Instead of saying just mark and then specifying the mark, you can go mark and then type, and then that allows you to add stuff to it. So, for example, here I've got my mark and I've got my rect. So I'm going to go mark, and then I'm just going to actually do a curly bracket or whatever they're called. Curly bracket is okay, I think. Mark, and I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to go again, apply those changes, nothing changes, right? Because I'm just setting it up to make other changes. So if I now within that, I can add more information. I go mark, type, rect, and then if I add a comma, what I can do, I can specify that I want tooltips to be switched on. I'm going to go tooltip, and it's going to go true. Now when I hover over, you can see my tooltip, and you can use the drill through that is associated with that value. So it's always helpful to have your tooltips switched on by doing it as I've just done. Mark, and then your type, rect, and then tooltip true. If I wanted, I could then change this to tooltip false, but that kind of makes no sense because, you know, if I wanted to be false, I just wouldn't type anything at all. Again, that's my first layer that I've created. When I want to create a second layer, all I've got to do is just do a comma, and then actually it's as easy as just, you know, copying and pasting the existing layer, you know. Now I've got mark, rect, true. That's my first layer, and now my second layer is exactly the same thing. Mark, rect, true. You see no difference because it's just a layer on top of a layer. But for example, if I want to kind of prove a point here, I can just say now tooltip false, and now you don't see the tooltip because this layer is sitting literally on top of this layer. So even though this one here is marked as tooltip true, this layer on top of it is marked as false, and it's directly on top. You now can't see the tooltip. So hopefully, hopefully that gets the point across. I just saw your comment there, Fernando. Yes, kids are always welcome these days from the home office. That was good fun. So what I want to do, I've said my mark is my rectangle, etc. So now I want to move on to a different type of mark, and I want to I want to say text, because this is my values. So I'm going to go mark, and I'm going to go text, and that's it. But it's not it, right? Because that makes no sense, because I've got to specify what is my text going to be. I can't just say mark text and expect something to happen. So now I have to use encoding. So here we've done all of our encoding for, you know, the x-axis, the y-axis, but you can also do your encoding from within that actual visualization, within that mark, sorry. So I want encoding that's going to apply just for this mark. So I do my comma, and I'll now just do encoding. This is basically how I want it set up, what values I want to use. Encoding, and then this, and then I'm going to say I want the text to be based on a field. Yeah. And that field that I want to use is going to be total points by game week. Hope it works. But the reason it doesn't work is that it does work, but you can't see it because I also need to specify the color. If I don't specify the color, it's going to use this color. So it's going to be the same thing. It's going to blend in the background, right? So now I need to specify what color do I want this text to be. Yeah. Again, I specified the text, I specified the field, and now what I need to do is specify the color. So color, and I go color, my value is black. There you go. That's what I wanted. So as you can see, it did work when I did it the first time. I just forgot to add the color, which is why you couldn't see it, because the fallback is always going to be what you specify outside that mark. Yeah. So now I have these values, and I have my whatever, 65 here, whatever. I'm not going to read every single value. That would be crazy. But you see that I now have my values, and I have my teams, and I have my rounds, my game weeks. So it's kind of set up at this point, kind of like a decent matrix, I would say. It's still stuff to do. I'm not finished yet. Don't worry. Can you show that? Add visual title? Yeah, visual title, that kind of stuff. Cool. I am just this question about the visual titles. We'll get into that. So other tooltips. Yeah. Right. So remember before, this is interesting. Good question. When I had a tooltip and I hovered over because I said tooltip is true. And then I created my mark and text, and I said, to make this point, I said tooltip is false, which is interesting because now when I hover over my rectangle, you can see that I have a tooltip. But now when I hover over my text, I get no tooltip because here's text is false, tooltip here. So if I then just go here and again type true, apply that change, you'll see that now I have my tooltip also when you hover over both the rectangle and the text. You can also specify which fields you want to see in your tooltip. I don't actually cover that. I haven't planned to cover that in this session, but you can do it and it's quite cool. It's something that once you start working with this sort of thing, you can have a look at. Yes, so the tooltips work fine, and also the drill throughs work just fine. So there's no real anything there that you have to be concerned about, you know. Excuse me. So, right, yeah. What we have here across the bottom, our x-axis, which is pretty standard, right? If you think about using like a line chart, a bar chart, the x-axis tends to be along the bottom, which is pretty reasonable. But when we're creating a matrix, kind of makes more sense to have those at the top. It's just what you're used to seeing, and it looks better, and I don't know, kind of works well. So we can change that. So now we're going to go into the config. And I said it like that because it's quite a lot of data. It's like, prepare yourself. And I said I'd come back to this part, and I wasn't lying. I'm going to do that now. This label axis, this axis label angle. If I just remove that now, what you'll see is along the bottom here, you'll see a change. And now they're all kind of at the wrong angle, or what I would consider to be the wrong angle. So by adding this axis label angle is 0, you have this. I personally prefer to put this sort of thing in the config, and this is why I'm talking about it now. So this config contains a lot of information. It can be quite overwhelming if you've never really seen it before, because it's, you know, a lot of stuff. However, if you take your time to read it, it's really just setting up everything that you see. It's basically, you know, it sets up the font size, so you can change the font size if you want, all this type of stuff. So playing around in here is, you know, very possible. Maybe change this to like 16, and you see now I have a really large axis text. Change it back to 12, so you can see basically just go through bits and pieces, play with it, and you can see what you can change. What I want to do is now 2 things. The first thing I want to do is I want to kind of fix what I just broke, for want of a better word, and this is here under my axis X, right? So if I go to my axis X and I re-enter what I just deleted, and just get rid of this because I don't need it. Label angle is 0. So you now see my label angle is back to 0, and I put it here in the config. I also want to, yes, Fernando, it's a very good question. Do I use a shortcut to run the code? I have this mouse, and I've got like shortcuts on it. So when I press this button here in the middle, it applies the changes. I should have mentioned that because it must be a bit confusing to see. I'm not actually applying anything. My apologies there. So for example, now I'm going to add this orient, and I'm going to say top. I hope that's correct. So now I'm going to press that button that I just showed you on my mouse, and then it automatically applies the changes. Yeah. So instead of going over here all the time, because that's how lazy I actually am, instead of moving my mouse here, I'll just click a button. And now I have my x-axis at the top, which is more standard for, you know, a matrix, table, whatever. So that's what we have thus far. I would do other little bits and pieces, like there's certain things that I don't like. I don't like on my y-axis where I have this title. The zoom in went lost, did it? Can people still see my screen? Okay, someone said the zoom in is lost. It's okay. Don't know. So here I'm going to go back to my y-axis, and I'm just going to say title, and again null or false. Let's go for null, see what happens. There you go. So now I have my, I know I've zoomed back out again. It's just so you can see the visualization. I'll zoom in on the visualization. There's too many different places to zoom in. It's very confusing. My title is gone because I don't feel I needed a title there. And also I could do the same for my x-axis. So if I go here, just copy and paste that. I really, really hate typing. I mean, I love Deneb and I love Vega-lite, but it seems like a bit ridiculous because I hate typing so much. Truly, I'm terrible at it. So I apply that change, and now you see that my title and my axis label is gone there as well. The reason I can take those out is because I simply prefer to write those inside the visualization title, which for me, I always just do in a very standard way. I just, you know, where it says title, I'll just add the title in the visualization. Each to their own, whatever makes you happy. So if I don't come out now of my Deneb visual editor, and I go back to my report, you can see now that I have my visualization set up here. Someone asked about titles. I'm not sure. I just always create a title like here, whatever. Yeah, title. I don't know. This is my preference, but if that's not a satisfactory answer, please let me know. So right. So what I like about this is because, you know, there's been this issue with Power BI for ages and very annoying matrix visualizations where you can't set the column width. No, you've got to, like, you know, if you want it to be certain width, you've got to like do it yourself. It's like I had a video that I had a workaround which worked, but it was pretty horrible. And I think there was a few of them kicking about. But now because of Deneb, we don't have this issue anymore. So if I like just do this, you know, ooh, nice. Seems like a small thing, but it's actually really helpful because, you know, it has a standardized width of each column header. If I move out my range here, it again does pretty much the same thing. Also, should I want to, I can go back into my editor, and instead of saying just like fit, so again, trying to zoom in, trying my best here. Instead of just saying fit within that space, I can also specify the width, you know? So I can just say, okay, so I want it to have a width, whatever, let's just pick whatever number really. Width of, so I do this. Excuse me. I don't want to zoom out. I'm scared of zooming out now. So I'm just going to make it crazy narrow so you can see it on this side. If I say like a width of like 10, you can see it really squashed up, right? It's ridiculous. So I can specify, what I'm saying is you can specify the width, which is quite cool. So now when I go back out, I'm back in my report here, and I again play with this. It does that. And now if I move this, it doesn't actually move with the size of the visualization. It's moving so that it's sticking to the width that I've specified. And I can do the same with height, right? So if I go back here, and instead of saying just width, I also say height. Let's give it something like a 25, so it's not a square. Now you can see what I've done there is I've specified the width and the height. So now in that visualization, I have like a matrix where I've got like a heat map type effect. I've got the values that I want, and I've specified the width and the height of each data square, if you will, which is cool for me. I find it very helpful. It can save a lot of time because it's been a nightmare actually trying to get those things sorted out, actually specifying the width and the height. And now it's so easy to do using Deneb. So one of the things I kind of wanted to highlight was the fact that when you're using this tool, when you're using Deneb, you can really just build upon your work in these incremental steps, you know, because what we started with was something wildly different to this. And I know it's, perhaps easy for me to say because, I've experienced doing this, but I found that once I started reading the documentation and understanding it line by line, so this, what a mark is and what layers are, when you want to do that sort of thing, it actually becomes quite easy to switch between different visualization types and just kind of play around with ideas. For example, something that I'd like to show here as well is this possibility of creating like a facet, which is like a small multiple. So a matrix with a small multiple is quite a cool thing. And to show what I'm talking about, I'll just jump back out of here and I'll like just look at this page. This is like all Deneb visualizations that I just kind of play around with to have like different ideas to see what I can do. So this is pretty much what we've been looking at here. And this one here is essentially a line chart. It's called a trail when you have this thickness of the line, which I really like, with small multiples. So if I can create a small multiple here, then I can create a small multiple with any visualization type, because really it comes down to just a few lines of this code here, which I'm going to take this and I'm going to apply it to the visualization that we created. Hopefully, I won't make any terrible mistakes. I say hopefully, I'll make no promises. And if it works, then we can have a matrix with smaller multiples, which I think is pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool anyway. So I'm going to go out of this and I'm going to go back to what we created, which is this one. And I'm then going to add that those small multiples. So I'm going to copy and paste like a chunk of code because it would take me too long to type it. It's terrible. But I'll go through it after I've done it. Yeah. So I'm going to, my data set, I'm going to zoom back in. Don't worry before you ask. Are we able to share the file? So I'll show you a couple of sources later where you can get access to, because there's lots of places where people just create templates, which I'm going to show how to create a template towards the end here. And you can access a lot of the templates that people create. It's a really good way to get started. So I'm definitely going to make a mistake here. So I'm going to try to remain calm and see if I can fix it. I am going to specify a number of things, basically. I'm going to copy in my chunk of code. Paste it there. So what I've said is I want to create one column. So columns 1, and I want it, this is the facet, is the small multiples, and I want to create it based on a field which I actually don't have in there yet, which is quite important to note. Titles I've removed, and this is just the sorting part. So sometimes I'll look at the documentation and I'll kind of get overwhelmed by the amount of code that's actually there. So this is why I kind of like to myself to break it down so much so I can understand that, what happens if I remove it? Will it actually break it? Will it still work? If it still works, then I know what is like the bare essentials. And then when I know what the bare essentials are, I can kind of build it up from that. So this part here is nothing essential. It's just me sorting the data in a particular structure. And we'll get that in a second. So I've set field position, so I need to actually get that into my in my data because I haven't done it yet. And I'm just going to add that here. So now I've got positions. So you'll also see, by the way, when I've done that, I've got to create this whole mess of stuff because now it's broken down this data based on my positions. That's because I forgot to type something earlier, but I can't fix that now. Basically here, when I've got my mark here, the encoding text, if I had actually aggregated that by sum, it would have prevented this from happening. So just to know. So one column, create a small multiple. So I'm saying here, create a small multiple based on a field position, getting rid of the titles. This is just a data type, and then I'm just sorting it this way. And then here, everything here, I've got the specification. So this is everything now that I'd written beforehand, the width, the layers, all of this stuff is now within what's referred to as a specification, because now this all just becomes a specification for my small multiples. And the reason I've added this curly bracket was because I added one here when I did my specification. So I'm not confident this is going to work, but I'm going to do it anyway. Haha, did work. I'm very happy now, just so you know. So now we have small multiples based on this field position. So you got goalkeeper, defender, midfielder, and forward. This is what this is doing when I say sort, because if I didn't have this part in, it wouldn't be sorted in the order that I wanted it to be sorted. So I've done that. Maybe I just take it out in case you care. See, now it's in the incorrect order. So this part here is simply to say sort the field position. Cool. So now I've got small multiples of a matrix. Fun, no? It's cool. I like it. You might be thinking, however, this is quite annoying because of the coloring, right? Because now, obviously, you know, generally speaking, goalkeepers have fewer points. Therefore, here, all the coloring is kind of mixed up, right? So we can get around that. It's not a problem. No, we can't get around it. There's something to take into account. So at the very bottom-ish, yeah, the very bottom, we have where our specification finishes. So if you want to see where things start and end, you can just collapse them like that way, and it shows you, yeah. So what I want to do is use something called resolve. Now I'll go back to my documentation just so you can have a look at this. Where are we? Not here. So, excuse me. Resolve. So basically, it determines whether the scale domain should be union. So if you want information about what you can do, what it does, you can just go to the documentation. I really want to emphasize that the documentation is very, very good. There are one or two things that could be better, but in general, to get you started, documentation is cool. Also has all the information, of course, about that we've just done, the facet, layer, concatenation, all this type of stuff. So now if I just here at the very bottom, add resolve, and then I'm going to change the color of the data, and I'm also going to look at how the x-axis works as well. So what I added here was resolve, which is showing the documentation, and I'm talking about the scale. So I'm saying I want the x-axis to be independent, and I want the color to be independent. So if we just start with just the color, so we can see how that works. I've applied that change, and you can see that previously, you know, the colors were a little bit, well, everything here was a paler color because all the largest values were in, you know, defender, midfielder. And now because we've got color independent, it's all, see, 15 is the highest number here, so it has this color. And then here, 64, you get the point, right? And if I add to that also x is independent, that'll also put the x-axis above each one. And it was kind of annoying before that it didn't have it. It's always helpful when you scroll down to have this value there above each column. And that's what it does. So you can create this small multiple. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say it's fantastically easy, but again, just those incremental steps to go from something like a bar chart, then changing the y-axis, and then adding the color, and then adding the mark for the text, you know, and then adding the facet for the small multiple. I think you can really see step by step. Hopefully you can see that. That's kind of what I'm trying to get across here. You can see step by step that you can create some pretty different visualizations. So now I have here, my color is independent, my x-axis is independent, and I scroll down, and this is what I have. If I wanted to, I could also, instead of saying columns, I could say rows, and then you'd have all that on rows instead of columns. Yeah? Cool. So, how am I doing for time, by the way? Do I have a bit more time, or am I running out of it? I'm curious.
No, time-wise, you're right. We have until 7.
Fantastic. So, from that, what I kind of want to show is how you can change this into something like, go back here, like this. So this uses pretty much the same data, but the visualization itself is, of course, wildly different, no? Excuse me. So, as I said a few times, it's basically about knowing what each mark does and then knowing what to write in those places to kind of shift stuff around. So, I want to keep my small multiples. I want to do something with my axes. So previously I've said that my y-axis is going to be team abbreviation, yeah? But I want now to create from this a bar chart. Now this is just me like creating random stuff at this point, yeah? Because I want to really, again, say, just change this, change that a little bit, and you'll kind of get to where you want to be going. So my x-axis is round. That's not going to change. This is exactly how it should be. If I then change my y-axis back to total points per game week, for example, and I change it to quantitative. Have that, which is a whole mess of nonsense, right? Because it's just a mess. But at the same time, I think it's quite cool that you can still kind of see the direction that you're going into straight away. Yeah. So just by a quick change of total points per game week, the abbreviation, going from that to kind of like that. Already you kind of know what's going to happen here. Fernando's off again. Thank you, Fernando. So I've changed this, my y-axis back to total points per game week. And I want to have a look at my my text. Yeah, actually, what I want to do is want to get rid of a value straight away because I no longer want to have anything aggregated by this team abbreviation. Yeah, so I can just get rid of that, but not right now. If I look at my text, so if you can't find something like I can't right now, just Control F and you can look for it that way. If I have my mark, text is the total points per game week. That's still pretty fine. I'm going to get rid of team abbreviation, and then you'll see, as I mentioned before, you get rid of team abbreviation, then you'll see that the values are a bit clearer. Why? Because I'm not seeing it broken down by team anymore. Even though I wasn't referencing them, I was still seeing that breakdown. So now I've got rid of that now. Okay, now it actually does look a little bit less messy. We can kind of see maybe where we're going to go. And go back to my config. And previously I had this orient. I mentioned orient top. I can just type bottom, or I can just get rid of it completely, but let's type bottom. And now you see my x-axis are back there. Fantastic. Just what I wanted. My mark text tooltip, true, using this total points per game week. Should also be able to just change something and type here dy, if I'm remembering correctly. Exactly. So now what I'm saying in my mark is that the text is exactly the same as it was before, exactly the same, but I've said dy is minus 15, which means I just want to offset it by minus 15, because when I had this, which is the default 0, it's sitting right on that line there, which is kind of not a nice thing. So if I say 10, it goes down into the visualization. If I say minus 10, it goes up over. So you know, what you can also do is create a rule that says if it's a negative number, then make it dy 10. If it's a positive number, then make it dy minus 10. So depending on the value. So you can create rules, all that kind of stuff, so that it creates very precise dependent on what those values actually are. So that's very helpful to know when you start creating this sort of thing. If you have values that are sometimes negative as well as positive values, you can make that change. For now, I'm just going to stick with dy is 10. Yeah. So again, I still have mark here, and I can change this from rect to bar, perhaps. You can see the difference there. The bar just kind of separates itself a little bit more. I could, of course, if I wanted to create a line, but I don't want to, but I'm showing you that I could. The colors are a bit weird. Don't worry, we're going to address that. We'll get to that in a second. I can also add another value. Going to be this bonus points there, and I can add a new mark based on those bonus points, because thus far, if we just go through it again one by one, we have our text, which is we have our mark is a bar. We have a mark which is a text. And then after that, all we have is our encoding. So now if I want to add another mark, I can just add it as we did before, below or on top one of these. But it's important to note that where you place this stuff is important. So now if I were to create something, another mark, and put it at the top, it would be behind these ones, yeah? So where you're putting the marks, the order in which you place them is important. This is something to remember, yeah? I have here my mark text total points per game week. What I want to add is something different, of course. But when I want to add it, I can quite simply just copy it and paste it. And that will then allow me to, as I said before, just take this one and just recreate it. So now I have my mark text true, but I don't want to have a text. Let's say a different sort of mark this time. I'm going to create a rule, yeah? And I want it to be based on this bonus here, okay? So this is what I'll do. And I'm going to add it, and I'm going to say that my rule is, I need to keep the tooltip on. I'm going to take this off because that's not relevant. And then within my encoding, so I can get rid of text because this is not a text field anymore. Now within my encoding for the rule, I can set this up how I want to have it set up. So basically say add the things that I've added here. So from here in encoding, I've got text here. I actually don't have anything. So now if I were to click that and enter that information, you'll see that the rule goes all the way at the top. Why? Because it's using the encoding that's standard here. If I don't set any encoding within the rule, it's going to use by default the encoding within the greater visualization encoding. So I just need to basically create something like this within inside this mark. So here I can kind of use what we have here and I want to specify that I want my Y to be based on the field, which is the bonus. Yeah. So here, for example, if I just take this, I can then specify that I want it to not be total points per game week, but instead I want it to be based on bonus. That's what I'm going to do now. Bear with me typing now. Sorry about this. Ay, ay, ay. So, always forget the commas. So now you can see I've said that this rule is based on the field bonus. And as you can see, the bonus is a much smaller value because actually the bonus points are a part of your total points. Yeah. I can do other things for this. Now I can say I want to change the stroke width, perhaps. Stroke. Make that a bit more prominent. 3. So now you can see it's a little bit thicker. And of course, to that, I can add my my data labels. So here, and this part is really nice and straightforward because, as I say, once you've created something, especially when it comes to the text, you can specify what it is just by copying and pasting this and putting it somewhere else. You know, I know I'm kind of repeating myself in this way, but I want to drive that point home that you can, once you've created something, by copying and pasting, you can obviously have to understand what you've created, but by copying and pasting, you can just save a lot of time, which might not be important to you, but it's important to someone like me because I really am not very good at typing, unfortunately. So that mark ends, and I'm going to say now mark text is true, and I want it to be field, not total points per game week. I want it to be field bonus. So I've done it, but I haven't done it because I said the text field should be bonus, but again, it's using the Y value total points per game week. So I just need to specify that I want it to be in the position not of total points per game week, but actually I want it to be in the position of bonus. You use the Y axis of bonus. So here that I did with the rule, when I've got Y field as bonus like that, should be able to use that same thing and put it actually within here. So now it's there. Yeah, you can see I have my 35,821, which is previously over there. I'm not saying this is the best visualization in the world. I fully understand it's a bit weird, but I'm simply saying that you can do these things to get to where you want to go, right? Also, we had this thing before whereby our we specified that resolve the x-axis and the color. Oh no! If it's crashed, I'll be very upset. Bear with a minute. Hopefully it'll come back. I think I'm having a web view 2 moment. If it has crashed, it's not the end of the world because I was pretty much finished, to be honest. I was going to change the color a little bit, and I was going to explain that. Oops, it's back. That was scary. We'll try again. No, it doesn't want to. This is an issue that happens sometimes because of Web View 2. I believe I've had Power BI open too long, and this happens sometimes. I'm not sure if it happens to everyone, but if I have my Power BI open, sometimes I have to save it and reopen it, and it works wonderfully. Yeah, so as I said before, what I did before with the x-axis and the color when I mark those as independent, you can do the same with the y-axis. So here, for example, you have a lot of this white space. So if you also mark the y-axis as independent, the scale will be independent as well. So obviously you wouldn't have this like huge gaps here. Again, this depends how you want to display your data. And also I was going to fix the color because the color is upsettingly crazy. But yeah, so those were the two things I have left to do. But I think due to this little issue here, it's not going to let me do them. I can't take any questions when we wait though, or in case it's completely broken, doesn't come back. If anyone has any questions they would like to throw at me, feel free to do so. I was also going to show you how to create a template, which is quite a handy feature. What do we say? Any questions, anyone? Whilst we wait for my Power BI to sort itself out. See, it's doing this time. I'm going to save it, and I'm going to close it, and I'm going to reopen it.
I think there were some questions in the chat in the beginning.
I saw one or two, yeah. I think I tried to address them as well. Someone said about like treats. Yeah, like Reed's trick to the value same as the background, so they get invisible while staying there. I'm not sure what trick that refers to, but it sounds cool, yeah. So we're back though. I think it's working again now. So what I was simply going to say was here at the bottom, I have X is independent, and I can also say Y is independent, just to sort out. Again, this is really how it depends how you want to display your data, right? Sometimes it's not good to have it independent Y-axis, but you can do it should you want to. So now we have this kind of sort out. So that could be confusing for the user, whatever, or if you know your data, it could be quite fine. It completely depends on what you're going for there. I guess when it's split down in a category, you kind of know what's happening. Regarding the color, I mean, here I've basically said color is based on a field total points per game week. But instead, I can just say color value and then just give that value. So here I've got color, and then try and get rid of all of this, see if it works. Maybe it won't work. Do I have a color? Yeah, just like that, for example. Just like here in this encoding, I can change down, say color. That performance still looks great, to be honest. So now I have color value black, which is of course not what you'd want at all. But if I use a little bit of this, and I use a hex code instead, you can use a color or you can use a hex code. So we use this. So now we have a more standard color. I really like this color, by the way. And then, you know, from this point, it's really just about like fine tuning and making sure that the values all work with one another. Because obviously here, your black on your purple doesn't really work very well. Again, completely depends on what you want to show. So I can go mark text. So if I can, inside my text, I could say whatever. If I'm doing it in the correct place. Now I've got here black. I could do here white, for example, and then it looks a bit better. All this type of stuff to really make the visualization look a little bit better. Yeah. So from the creating visualization side, I'm pretty much done. Again, what I really like to, or what I always hope that the point that I always hope that I make successfully is that the documentation basically is fantastic. That's really what I'm trying to say. The documentation is fantastic. You can take the examples that they have here. So this is literally what we started with, combined with the examples that they provide you, and then combined that with the documentation, which explains what a mark is, which explains, you know, how to, you know, switch off your legend and how to change the color and how to create a layer. So if I just do an F search and then like the word layer, and it tells me what a layer is. And then as you can see, you go down and it gives you examples of how to use the layers. For me, it was very, very helpful. And also you can go into this and say, okay, open in Vega editor. And then you can just, if you don't want to play around with it in Power BI, you can play around with it here, you know? And the good thing about it is you hover over it and it tells you what these things mean, you know? There's a lot you can do with it, and it's very helpful to use this as a learning source. I had an issue the other day. I should always mention Kerry Kolosko. And I had an issue the other day which I Googled. I couldn't fix it, and I managed to fix it because Kerry had posted something. Kerry does amazing work with Deneb, wonderful stuff. She creates something like this. Actually, this is the post that helped me fix my issue, because it was an issue with the legend. The legend work can be a little bit tricky, depending on what you want to do. And this quite beautiful looking report with some, based on a quite amusing data set there. Based on what you posted here, it really helped me. So there's loads of learnings resources. I mean, I have videos on YouTube. Kerry has great blog posts. The Vega-lite website, as I said, is fantastic, as is the documentation created by Daniel for Deneb. You really have a lot of stuff at your fingertips to learn all this. And I truly believe it's very, very much worth the effort, because the number of times, I mean, I think anyone who's worked with Power BI for any amount of time has at some point felt restricted by a visualization. Like, I wish I could do that. I can't do that. And sometimes it can be frustrating. Putting a bit of time into this will unleash some extra Power BI awesomeness. So yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say about this matter. Again, questions if there are any, I can happily take at this point. I mentioned the creation of a template, which I forgot to show you. And to do that, you can click on this and it generates a JSON template. And then it basically gives you got to enter all the data, the name, the description, the fields, descriptions, and then you can just copy and paste this. And then, I mean, this part I found particularly helpful because at work, I've created some templates that other people can use should they want to. And that means you can create something once and then you never have to stress about it maybe ever again. Because you've created it once, you've created your template, which you can store somewhere, and then in the future, you kind of know how to create multiple different types of visualization without that initial effort that you go through the first few times as you learn. Yeah?
Can I ask you a quick question?
Mm-hmm. Hopefully.
Yeah, so yeah, I remember Daniel showed us how to put some kind of comments in this kind of the visual editor. I forget how did he do that? Normally, how did you put any comments in this? Because when you said created a template, we really want to reuse. So the comments will help us to understand what we have done.
So it's not like your standard this, you can't comment that way. You can add like description areas, but for the template side, it's actually quite cool because, I mean, I could be wrong. Oops, what have I done? Yeah, sorry, clicked the wrong button here. I found it quite helpful that here you can actually basically type in your description. So here I have fields and I have round, but for example, if I,
Oh, I see. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is like the Power Query like property. You can put some kind of the notes there, give you some kind of hints.
Exactly, and that'll basically say here you enter the date you need for blah 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 blah. So you can add the information, so it's a little bit easier to understand for either yourself in the future or your colleagues or whomever. So this is where you would enter that information. Yes.
Cool. So in the coding, do they have any kind of the color coding for the different part of the script, or this just a black, or how do you do the coloring there?
Yes, so they don't. I mean, for me, that's perfectly fine because it tends to be like I have issues with color sometimes. So, it's just green and blue, spec width step 30. It's really, that's what it is. So your values essentially are the blues, and also so everything that's green is like the command or the whatever, So there's nothing color coded.
Okay, I see. Because I see the description didn't change like some kind of different code, different color.
In the description,
to stand out.
No. In the description itself, no, it doesn't. It stays. It's a fair point. It stays the same. So if I go back here in the description, blah 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 blah. No, it stays within the same color. So you have to look out for those keywords. Again, it's a fair point. When you want to create something that other people are going to use, you want things to stand out as much as possible. So you do have to kind of go through it. There's always going to be like this learning curve, so you can't just hand someone a template and say, there you go, use that, mate. So you have to like really kind of make them understand what they need to be looking for. But yeah, like for me, maybe if description, maybe not like a color, but like if it was bold, for example.
I like this approach as far as we have some kind of feasibility on hand, so we can use to achieve that. It doesn't matter how fancy right now. Thanks so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for your questions, mate. One thing I forgot to mention was here in your settings, you have to switch on cross filtering. Okay, so by default, the cross filtering isn't switched on. So if you click this button here, it will switch it on, which means apply whatever. If you don't have it switched on, then basically it won't cross filter. Yeah. So now cross filters, I mean, doesn't cross filter well because that's just me being weird. But that's because I go here in my edit and I go to my settings and I make sure my cross filtering is switched on. If that's not switched on, it just won't cross filter. Yeah.
But can I ask you another question? So normally in the Power BI visual, we have this kind of the effect part. You can make the visual for the different kind of effect. For example, like the shadow, for example, this kind of board or this. So do we have any functionality here?
Yeah, the effect is still there.
Here. Okay.
That's still there. That's because that's part of like the general settings more rather than the visual settings. So if you want to put on a drop shadow, you're still completely free to do so. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah. I mean, a little bit. I mean, please, a question. Go for it.
No worries. Just, I'm not sure if you already addressed it, but there was a question about how often do you implement the Deneb chart in a production report for clients? I guess goes towards, is there any drawbacks in doing so, or?
I mean, I've used a few. I've never created a report that's fully Deneb. Because there's no need to create a report that's fully. I only use them when is necessary. Drawbacks. Off the top of my head, no. I mean, it might take an extra half second to load sometimes when you first load the report, but there's nothing that's someone's ever said any like huge restriction or anything that doesn't work. And like I said, your drill throughs, the functionality works like any other visualization. Your drill throughs work, your tooltips work, the filtering works. No, I mean, for me, it's more the opposite, because it's more the fact that I can do things. I mean, it's a shame because I've got some nice visualizations I created last week that I can't show you because it's for work and I don't want to get fired. So it's more for me. If at any point it comes up, I'll be very open and say, here's a draw, but I haven't really thought of it. Little bits and pieces like silliness. Like I did a video like a week, 2 weeks ago about this sort of thing. I've always had an issue with drill throughs in Power BI, because it's great if you have this new, if I just, for example, the new visual header thing where you kind of hover over and you can drill through that way. That works really nicely. However, if you're using your own tooltip, you don't really have that, right? Because I have my own tooltip, so this drill through thing doesn't come through. So I can still right click and go to drill through, or there's that option to kind of click on it to drill through. Now I can do that way. I don't like that though, because it's not a natural thing that a user does to click on something to make a drill through. So I was kind of playing around with this concept that if you can drill through on something, I'll just zoom in a little bit. It's all about zooming today, right? If I can drill through on something, just to change the cursor a little bit. So here I've got my standard cursor, yeah? But here, however, you see my cursor has this little thing sticking out. So if you can communicate somehow to your users that when you see that you can drill through, then it's a little bit helpful because then you can click on that. So these little bits and pieces, these, well, Kleinigkeiten, you know what I'm saying? These things really make it for me. And that's really this thing with the arrow if I just search for the word cursor, because I can't remember where I put it in, cursor is alias, you know? So you can change what the cursor is when you hover over, which I think is a really wonderful thing, because it really allows you to talk to the user more than was previously possible, you know? So, sorry, short answer, I'll say drawbacks that I can think of, no. But that's maybe because I haven't investigated enough yet with users. But as soon as I find one, I'll update you that. I don't want it to be perceived to be biased. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. And as I say, you can share all of this, you know, within organizations completely for free. I mean, that's huge. Come on, to have this flexibility within your visualizations and really to create. I mean, this is what we used to have, all these visualizations, and now we have. I know we have Charticulator as well, by the way. I'm not. I will draw no comparisons because I don't have enough experience as Charticulator. But it's fantastic that we have these options now, right? And within this one visualization, you can do what pretty much all the other visualizations do, and more. You know, not all of them, but you know, pretty much all of them. You know, so if there are any drawbacks for me, they're nothing that warrants to not use it.
Yeah, it certainly seems like a really, really interesting tool. I'll definitely dig around and try it out.
Absolutely. And if you have any questions, you know where to find me, you know. But no, it's great fun. I mean, I'm totally nerdy. I totally understand that, but I do really enjoy the visual element of creating reports. You know, it's kind of like, for me, the visual element is sometimes the treat that you get in the end after working with horrific data sources and APIs and all these different things that you have to struggle through. It's like, now I can create some pretty pictures. Love it. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other questions? I don't think so. So I guess you just explained everything so well, or everybody's still floored by all the options and by everything they can do. So I'll just quickly take over the screen, and we can close this right here. Just give me a second. Hopefully you can see my screen. Yes. So yeah, first of all, thanks, Ben, for the presentation. As I said, really, really interesting stuff. So I'll definitely gonna dig in a little bit more because, as you said, sometimes you feel a little bit restricted, and this opens up so many new possibilities. So thanks a lot for that.
Pleasure.
Again, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, if you want to rewatch what Ben just shared with you, you can do so on our YouTube channel, and I'll post the links again in the chat so that you have them there. And yeah, join us for next week with Power BI Governance 101. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Thanks, Ben, for presenting, and hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, my pleasure. Again, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun. So yeah. Thank you, and take care.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.